Last week in the rituals of Maundy Thursday and Easter, we delved into the story of the betrayal, death, and resurrection of Jesus. And throughout the story of his life, as told in the Bible, Jesus foreshadows his own death. It's as if he knew that he wouldn't be around forever, that Good Friday would surely someday come. And so he spent his life and his ministry making disciples of others. He basically said, I have an important message for you, but it does not end with me. You must carry the flame. One of the most important messages to his disciples is found in the Sermon on the Mount, which I read earlier. Blessed are you who are poor in spirit, who mourn, who are meek, who hunger and thirst for righteousness, who are merciful, who are pure in heart, who are peacemakers, and who are persecuted. For you will be comforted, receive mercy, inherit the earth, know God, and see yourself as children of God. As your minister of congregational life, part of my ministry with you is creating pathways for you to grow your spiritual lives, to deepen your connection with the holy, to understand yourself as Unitarian Universalists, and to find ways to give back, both within and beyond this church. Basically, to live your faith and to be an embodiment of the good news that we have as Unitarian Universalists. In many Christian churches, this would be called discipleship. Though disciple is not an identity that many Unitarian Universalists claim, I believe that many of you are living it. So I've been pondering recently what it means to be a Unitarian Universalist disciple. And I think at its core, it's about faith formation and about carrying the flame. My call to discipleship was not as dramatic as that of the apostles who were called by their teacher Jesus to carry on his message from a mountaintop and who were later commissioned to spread the gospel to all the nations. But it did involve some formative teachers and mentors. I grew up in a Unitarian Universalist church in Albany, New York. So along with my parents, it was my religious education teachers who had the biggest impact on my faith formation, and who stoked the flame of Unitarian Universalism in my heart. They taught me what it means to be a person of faith through their words and their actions. And as I became a youth and a young adult, this circle of mentors expanded to include many ministers and religious leaders, both lay and ordained, who in various ways showed a way forward for me. Many of these people I'm still in touch with, but some have died. At some interesting times too. One at the beginning of my ministry formation on the eve of my seminary application interviews. And one on the eve of my interview with the UU Ministerial Fellowship Committee, which is the panel of ministers and lay people who, after seminary and internships and more, gave me the go-ahead to pursue ordination. I think of the impact of Jesus' death on his disciples and how in their grief they felt called to carry on his message and ministry. I know some of that feeling, and I wonder if you do too. These teachers and mentors taught me what it means to be a person of faith, what it means to live Unitarian Universalism, and they also recognized and affirmed and encouraged my call to ministry. Some of them even asked me before I was sure of my call or had even voiced any kind of interest whether I had considered pursuing ordained ministry. In a way, they held up a mirror, reflecting my gifts and passion, and some even shared a vision of the kind of ministry they saw me doing in years down the road. So I followed my yearnings and their encouragement to become not only a committed disciple in a way, but to devote my life and work to ministry. The Sermon on the Mount, particularly the section called the Beatitudes, is a message to Jesus' disciples about who they are and what it means to stand by their faith. Interestingly, it takes the form of a blessing. In the words of the theologian Martha Stortz, she wrote that Jesus introduces himself to us But he also introduces disciples to themselves, for the Beatitudes offer a character sketch of who disciples will become if they follow him. He invites them to make the blessing that he gives them real in practice. My path of UU discipleship and my call to ministry have been composed of a series of such invitations and blessings, all of which introduced me to parts of who I am. I came to know Beth the minister and to see myself in this role. The blessings came from teachers and mentors along the way, from my RE teachers in childhood to colleagues today. Who are these teachers and mentors in your life? Who have called you to be who you are, who have called you into a deeper relationship with the holy, or perhaps even called you into deeper relationship with this church? Who are the people that have introduced you to yourself? Because it's not only ordained ministers or Jesus' disciples who have such experiences or such teachers. You probably have people who first welcomed you to this church, whether as a child or an adult. People who nurtured your growth here or in the church of your childhood, invited you into greater involvement in this community and a group or cause that you care about, and showed you the way, whether it was to the bathroom or the classrooms or to a deeper spiritual life. Perhaps you've been this person for someone else. It can begin with something as simple as saying hello to people at the door of church, or moving beyond your circle of friends and coffee hour to notice those who look like they're trying to find their way, and being a welcoming presence and a guide for them. Will you say hello to the visitor standing awkwardly in the narthex or Channing Hall? When you do, you could end up initiating the process of discipleship for someone, of growing in deeper relationship to their faith in this church. Now, I can't help but mention Pat Davidson as an example, because I know that there are many of you for whom Pat was one of those people who made you a UU disciple. Pat, a longtime member and pillar of this church, as you heard Daniel say, died suddenly this week after a fall. She was vibrant and radiating life until the end. And she was also the person who welcomed generation after generation of visitors, members, and even ministers here at First Unitarian. When I arrived to serve this church, she arranged a time to come to my office and welcome me, bringing me a cup of coffee. And I know she did something similar with my colleagues. She probably greeted each and every one of you at one time or another as you entered the sanctuary. She was a leader in too many ways to name. She, along with the Women's Alliance of our church, was involved in the development of the Roe v. Wade case. And she spoke from this pulpit in worship just 2 weeks ago. She did all of this with such kindness and grace. And so in a way, we have lost a great teacher who embodied what it means to be a faithful Unitarian Universalist. The teachers and mentors in our life help us to discern what it is that we are following or what guides us. It's not necessarily necessary that we follow them like people followed Jesus, but we all have something that grounds our faith and that guides us. And so one of the first steps of discipleship, of becoming a Unitarian Universalist disciple, is getting clear about what that is. Is it a creed, a covenant, a set of principles or values? And then we take what we've received and allow it to work on and in us. We let it transform us as we transform it, making it our own. And this is what we hope for every person in this church, including our newest members who joined today. Figure out what it is that guides you and allow yourself to grow and transform through living a life of faith and service to this church and to the world. And we're here to help you do this. That's part of what we do as your ministers. And one of the resources for doing this is Faith Forward. The program that you hear us talk about, the series of adult faith development classes that explore what it means to be a UU and how we do church. Covering everything from spiritual practices to theology, UU history and the history of this church, social action and service, and opportunities to practice speaking about your faith. Through this process of transformation, you will learn more about who you are and discern your unique role in the body of disciples. What do you care about passionately, and where can you make a difference? I heard a story once about a church consultant who was working with a mega church with something like 10,000 members, who described wandering through the building late one night and encountering a group of custodians taking a break. He complimented them on the very clean and well-maintained facilities, and one of the custodians said to him, "We're all ministers. When we're cleaning a room at night, we think about what's going to happen there during the day and how we can serve that aim." So for them, being a custodian was more than a job. It was in service to a larger purpose. I found that mega churches, especially mega evangelical churches, are really good at helping people identify and act on these gifts, whatever they might be. I've always loved the analogy that the Apostle Paul uses to describe the church in his letter to the Corinthians. He describes the church as a body with different parts, each with their own distinct but interrelated purposes. Each person has strengths and skills and perspectives that complement others, and together we make up the church. We come together serving and sharing our gifts, all contributing toward a larger purpose. I want to read you part of what is written there in 1 Corinthians 12. It says, "Now if the foot should say, 'Because I am not a hand, I do not belong to this body,' it would not for that reason stop being part of the body. And if the ear should say, 'Because I am not an eye, I do not belong to this body,' it would not for that reason stop being part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? The eye cannot say to the hand, 'I don't need you,' and the head cannot say to the feet, 'I don't need you.' On the contrary, those parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable. And the parts that we think are less honorable, we treat with special honor. And the parts that are unpresentable are treated with special modesty, while our presentable parts need no special treatment. But God has put the body together, giving greater honor to the parts that lacked it, so that there should be no division in the body, but that its parts should have equal concern for each other. If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it." I love this passage because I think this is what a congregation of disciples looks like. Differentiated, but belonging together in an interconnected whole. Figuring out your gifts and passions and putting those into action turns work into service, and turns service into a spiritual practice. Because it draws on your gifts, and it is fulfilling, and it connects you with others and with something larger than yourself, the spirit that moves within this church body as a whole. The Beatitudes spoken by Jesus on the mountaintop introduced the disciples to themselves. Meek, poor in spirit, merciful, persecuted, peacemakers and mourners. And he said, no matter where you find yourself in this picture, you are blessed and you will know God. So let me introduce you to yourself, what I see in you. You are loved and you are blessed. You are whole and you are imperfect. Your presence is a miracle and it is a blessing. You were born to love, to dwell together in peace, to be seekers, and to serve others. Our affirmation that we say every Sunday is a wonderful statement and blessing of all that we are and all that we can be. We embody and live these things to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony with the divine. Turning a blessing into practice, as Jesus' disciples did, is a way of proclaiming the good news of our Unitarian Universalist faith, that we are all worthy of love and justice, we're all connected, and no one need be separated from the holy. This message matters to me, and I hope to you. And it is a message that is desperately needed in our world today. Now, we are not a church that proselytizes, but we are a church that stands by our faith, as Olympia Brown talks about it. We stand by our faith in a life-saving and life-nourishing love. It's a message that matters, and we are a church that matters. So let's share it and live it with gusto. I want to close with the words spoken by John Murray, the father of Universalism, or spoken actually to John Murray, the father of Universalism in America. They say, "Go out into the highways and byways. Give the people something of your vision. You may possess only a small light, but uncover it. Let it shine. Use it in order to bring more light and understanding to hearts and minds. Give them not hell, but hope and courage." So friends, disciples, people with Unitarian Universalism on your heart, may you carry the flame, holding it high to light yourself and others on your way. This we can all do in different ways together. May it be so. Amen.